we're going to get started in just a few minutes. Well, I'm Jodi Goodman, and I'm with the Carrollton Housing Authority. And Miss Martha is going to welcome everyone with the emergency shelter. Come in. You can come in. Miss Martha.
Thank you, Jodi. Hey, it's great to see all of you, and glad to know that there's this much interest and people who want to do something to help those less fortunate in our community. It's good for me to look out here. I'm Martha. I'm the director of the emergency shelter, the battered women's shelter, the children and women's shelter, the whatever you call it, but it's still the shelter. And, you know, I just welcome all of you. We have been around a long, long time. I'm looking this morning in the audience. I see board members from the shelter. I see volunteers. And I see friends who have been there so long and so many donors. And I can tell y'all that it takes a community to help people. What we serve is homeless individuals who are facing the terrible aspects of domestic violence and homelessness. And as you all well know, if you don't know, that domestic violence is still the #1 cause in the United States for homelessness in women and children. Many times we look at it because it has to be served differently because of safety issues, but it is still one of the greatest problems that we have. Not only are they rendered homeless, but they also have a number of other things that has to be taken care of. So that is not all we're going to talk about today. We hope when we leave here today that we will have formulated some kind of plan of what we think would be necessary to help the people that we're all trying to help. And when we do that, we always help our community. So thank y'all so much for coming.
Okay, so our main purpose in this breakout session is one of our main purposes is to discuss what's currently being provided in our community in terms of emergency shelter or assistance. So we're going to kind of go down the line and talk about each of our programs and what we provide in that aspect. Ms. Kathy, you want to start with St. Vincent de Paul?
Sure. I'm Kathy Richards with St. Vincent de Paul Society, and we don't have a shelter, a location per se. So the only way we're able to help people is certainly we try to prevent them from becoming homeless by paying rent and their utilities, emergency type items. But we do, many times, I've had 5 families this month, in the month of January, that we had to pay for their weekly stay in, you know, a temporary efficiency type lodge or motel type thing. So we do provide shelter for that. And so many times, and a lot of times it's families because there's really not a place for a husband, wife, or husband, wife, and children to stay in Carrollton.
Right.
You know, so we do help with that, and we have seen more and more of them. St. Vincent, many of you may not know who St. Vincent de Paul Society is. It really is an international charity, and actually it was started, our founder was a 19-year-old college student in Paris, France, who help the homeless. Somebody came to him, he was studying law, I think, and one of his friends came to him and said, you know, there's lots of people in the streets that are starving and they have no place to live and they're homeless. You know, what are you doing about it? You know, are you practicing your faith? You know, and he said, you know, we can talk about it and all this philosophical things about the homeless, whatever, but what am I really doing about it? So he started, him and 4 or 5 other guys started taking food out to them. They were in the streets. So, you know, even a 19-year-old college student can make a difference, because this is 180 plus years later, and the St. Vincent de Paul Society is all over the world. They've been in Georgia for over 100 years. Gosh, I think we've been here in Carroll County probably 25, something like that. There's really, in our charity, we do lots of things. We consider there is no charity that's foreign for St. Vincent de Paul. So we've helped with, you know, medical bills and eyeglasses even. But I'd say the majority of times we help people with their utilities or housing, whether it be emergency housing or rent. But, and like Kim said really earlier, we've really got the working poor now. I think now more than ever, you know, the faces are just, you know, totally different, and you certainly can't judge anybody by their appearances either, because everybody, certainly, was it Ralph? That top is Ralph? Robert, I'm sorry. You know, he certainly looks like any of us here in this room, you know. And there, so many times I've said, there but by the grace of God go I, you know. I mean, it could happen to any of us. And I think too nowadays, since you have smaller families, you know, and so there's not as many families to take care of their family members who get in a situation, get down, lose their jobs, get sick or whatever, you know. But we do need to, in the area of housing, at least temporarily, what we have found a problem with the availability here in Carrollton, the pricing. There's maybe 3 or 4 that have been willing to work with us, because, you know, with it being a charity, we can't pay $500 for a motel for somebody for a week, you know, naturally. And so we do try to, negotiate. I won't say jew them down, but we try to negotiate with them, you know, to help us out if we're paying for. But and there are some that work.
I think that's one of the gaps, or one of the things that you know, we want to talk about today that we could do better in our community. Missy,
Sure.
you want to talk about Carrollton City Schools and introduce yourself?
I'm Missy Sullivan. I'm the Families in Transition Coordinator for Carrollton City Schools, or the Homeless Liaison. Every school system actually has a Homeless Liaison that's designated. I am new to this position. This is my first year, but not a newbie to education. This is my 28th year in education, actually. In Carrollton City Schools, we try to do a lot of child finds and identify who our children are. We make sure that they have free lunch, and of course breakfast. We make sure that they have school supplies. We try to meet those educational needs of the children. I do have people daily ask me for rent or to help pay utilities, but the school system doesn't have money for that. But what we try to do is really meet the needs of the students while they're at school, and we have backpack programs that are brought in, and we try to make sure that these children are seen about Christmas, and if there's a coat drive, I make sure that information's sent out. And this year we sent out information regarding a Thanksgiving dinner that was actually delivered to some of our families. But currently in Carrollton City Schools, we do have over 150 children identified. 150? Over 150. In Carrollton City, what I find is, because there are a large amount of hotels, we will have a lot of transient students, so students that might be coming from the county that will come to the city because they're in a hotel. We try to keep students in the school of origin. That's one of our big pushes, because every time a child changes schools, they lose about 4 to 6 months of their educational progress, and so that hurts them. So we try to keep them. So I actually bus students from the county into the city. So sometimes you will see a city bus out in the county collecting and bringing back, because we try to keep them, if it's feasible, where they started out that school year. So we try to keep them in that school for that school year. It's not always possible if they're too far away, if the bus ride's going to be from 5 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. That's not really feasible for our babies. But we do that. Another thing that we offer through Carrollton City Schools, we're very blessed. We have an after-school program that starts 1st grade and goes through 12th grade. There is transportation provided. So at the junior high and the high school, they get out of school like 2:35, and they are actually stay until 6 o'clock Monday through Thursday. They're given provided snack. We have tutors that are there. We make sure that they're caught up in their homework. It gives them a chance to use a computer, because sometimes if they have like charges at the public library, they're not able to use the computer at that time. So that's their only availability to get their homework done. So we try to make sure that they're taken care of. They can even do credit recovery through the after-school program at the high school level. At the elementary school and the middle school, they are there Monday through Friday. It's till 6 o'clock Monday through Thursday, and then 5:30 on Friday. we run the buses, so you'll see Carrollton City buses running really late. And there again, we make sure that there are tutors, they're getting their homework done, they're getting snacks. We do fantastic field trips during the summer. And so this is all done through a grant. So right now we've been very blessed. And with our kindergartners, we do have an after-school program that I can pay for through the homeless grant, but there's not transportation. So that's kind of an issue that we have. But we do try to definitely meet the educational needs of our homeless students and try to do child find for our homeless students and take care of them and keep them if we can in Carrollton. So that's what we do.
And Denise Kuzi, who's the county homeless liaison, she's sitting on another panel and shared basically the same information as what the county provides, the transportation to make sure that the child remains in the same school system so they don't have to transfer back and forth. And they're also able to provide school supplies and clothing if it's needed.
Oh, I do want to add that this year, we do have some incidental needs that we can't meet the needs, we can't use our grant for. And usually I just hit people up and say, oh, this child really needs this, would you help me out? Like for instance, a student who's wearing 5 t-shirts and come to find out it's because she doesn't have a bra. And bras are expensive. I don't know if you guys know this, but, and they don't always have the exact size of the Salvation Army that our students need. So that would be an instance where we just have a need. So Dr. Edwards, our superintendent, has actually even came up with the idea of a Blue Jean Day where all the faculty and staff will get to pay $5 and wear blue jeans, which is unheard of. And we're going to be able to use that for incidental money for our students. For some of those needs that it's hard to justify through the grant because it has to be related to a grade. But we know we want to take care of our babies. So I wanted to throw that out there. I'm really excited about that.
Yes. And then Miss Kathy Parsons, who's also serving on another panel, I know we're probably all familiar with the men's shelter 415 Hope, which is a 90-day shelter. It's a recovery program for homelessness. You know, it's just intensive. They have 12 beds, one of which they keep reserved for a veteran. So that's also a service that's being provided in our community. And Miss Martha, do you want to talk about the emergency shelter?
Well, I did.
I know.
I thought, but I will again.
You want to elaborate?
I will again. I can tell you that what we do is primarily, as I said, serve victims of domestic violence and their children. But not only that, we have, when our wonderful board of directors built the shelter, even back 36 years ago, their plans was always to serve homeless people. Well, of course, as I said, domestic violence victims may be classified over here as something else, but basically they're homeless. First and foremost, they're rendered homeless because they have to leave their home because it isn't safe. And then secondly, we knew that there'd be those women and children and even males. So I want you to know the shelter's not just serving those people that walk through our door. If we shelter almost 700 people a year because of domestic violence or homelessness, because our board of directors set aside 8 designated beds when the shelter was being built that would be served emergency-wise for homeless women and children. Also, we do homeless prevention, big time. So what we do is when families are leaving the shelter, women, when they come to us, leave everything behind. Not all of them, but when they do come, then when their children and them are ready to leave the shelter, everything has to be replaced for them to live. Furniture, which comes from a wonderful community, but also there's rental deposits, energy deposits, and other things that we help not only these women now, we also have prevention money that the community applies through us, through a grant that pays rental assistance and energy assistance. So we do that homeless prevention community-wise to help prevent people from becoming homeless. Also, another thing we do is it's not just a place where we go in and lock the door on battered women. It's a place where we do programs. And this is open to former victims. We have financial management classes that are open to everyone in the community that we have helped. Let's say, for instance, in our homeless prevention, I don't believe paying a month's rent is going to cure it. Do you guys? It's not going to happen. They have to be educated in how, when they do go to work, to how to spend their money. So we have people at the shelter, we have classes where that we can invite people in from the community that needs the help for financial management classes. It's a part of we do counseling, we do crisis intervention, we do all this for those that's in the shelter. We do the children's programs, parenting classes, we even do on-site GED classes. We do everything that we can do to help her maintain when she leaves there, women and children. We also opened that up at another place. Many of y'all are familiar with the transition house that we opened about 9 years ago, or is it longer than that? Maybe 12 years ago. That we opened. It's 8 efficiency apartments, and that is a wonderful, wonderful program because the people can stay long-term. 6 of those apartments are for long-term, and 2 of them are for short-term. And if a person it's been proven through their stay there that if people have stability, they're required to work, they're required to save some of their money, they are required to live on a budget, build their own budget. We don't do it for them, but build their own budget and learn to save and manage their money. Would y'all believe that in the years we've been there, 5 women, single women, left there owning their own home? Now, is that success or not? So it can happen. Things can turn around. Yes, I think it's well worth it. And I think that we owe a lot of this, not just to hardworking people like Arlene, who is the shelter manager, who does so many of these programs and who makes the children come alive with the program she does. And Jan, you're a volunteer, you know what that's like. I can tell you that there's some people in this world that, yes, they're not going to be helped because they refuse to help themselves. Now, is that true? That is true. But yeah, for a majority of people, if you give them enough support and help them in the way that they need to help the most, you can turn things around. But there is a lot of good things going on in Carroll County that I truly believe, like at the shelter. A lot of you probably didn't know that we did all these programs and that they're open to non-residents as well as residents. You probably didn't know a lot of things that go on about us doing homeless prevention, them doing homeless prevention, and other people. I can tell you there's a lot of good programs that already exist that we need to tap in and make this a collaborative to where people can apply, know where to apply, and then we need to find out those that are perpetually coming back and asking for help over and over again and try to do something to educate that family to live a different way. Now, do y'all agree that would be a good idea? But that's enough about me. We do lots of stuff, and I'm glad, and we couldn't do it if it wasn't for our community. So if we're doing it for our community, then it's okay with me. As long as we please God and do what is right, then I'm real happy about that.
Martha.
Yes.
I'm George Ragsdale.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm George Ragsdale.
George, you're a good friend and a donor. Thank you so much.
That's not what I was talking about.
No, but I recognize.
I didn't know that you took in women who were not.
We do. We have 8 designated beds for women, and that's due to the wonderful board of directors years ago who had the insight to see that there was going to be women and children that would be on the street. And we also put intact families through some of our homeless prevention money. Some intact families go into our transition house in those 2 short-term apartments. And that intact family means a man, a wife, and a husband and children. But, you know, all in all, we can feel really good about what we are serving when we go home at night. Yes?
I hear all this good news about all of the things that are available.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not hearing, what don't we have? What is it we need to?
That's what we're trying to figure
Not
out.
enough money.
We're getting there. We're getting there. We wanted to first explain to the community what is available because a lot of us know, but a lot of us don't know. So I just have a couple of more points, and then we'll move on to what's missing, I guess.
Martha, what's the capacity not in the transition house but in the shelter?
And the shelter, if we count, we have 24 adult beds and for older children, and then we have numerous baby cribs and toddler beds. So we can easily sleep 32 to 35 people, counting our toddler beds now. Remember that, yes. Yes,
Your efficiency apartments, do they stay full?
they do. They
all the
do.
time? So
They do.
more of those would be a benefit.
I think that Transition House is a wonderful program. I truly do. After our experience with it, I think it is. because
They
it
can
gives.
stay up to 2 years, so once they're there and doing well, normally they don't come open very often.
Do we have another question over here? I thought I saw him. No. Okay, so we also have St. Margaret's Outreach, and Miss Catherine Gordon is serving on another panel as well, but they provide some emergency assistance, much like St. Vincent de Paul, through short stay hotels. That's not their business, so to say, but they're definitely one of those organizations I call on quite often, probably more often than Catherine would like me to. But and then there is Open Hands Ministries, that is a collaboration of 13 churches that also has a small pot of funds that might, be available in an emergency situation for some short stay hotel, housing for a family if there's an emergency situation, as well as Hands of Hope. There's also some transient funds, and Chad, I might pick on you for this one, if you want to explain what the transient funds are.
It's called the Mackel Fund, or us and the police department, we just know it as, and Jodi knows it as a transient fund. And it's where I deal with Dan Tolbert, Dan Stewart, who I grew up with, and it's money that's through the Presbyterian Church, and there may be other churches that put money in it. I don't know. And it's a fund if, say, we run across someone that is coming through Carrollton, trying to get somewhere further down the road, we can put them up usually a night, maybe two in a motel, get them a meal, maybe a tank of gas, little stuff like that. Additional thing we do is through the Police Explorer Post is about once or twice a year we have a canned food drive, so we kind of supplement them on their travels. The problem with the transient fund, if you're from Carroll County, you're from this area, or it really doesn't apply. It applies more for people that's out of state and that is moving on to somewhere else. And that's when I usually have to pick up the phone and I call Jodi to see what she can help me with. And then with the mental issues, I call Dawn. And so me and Kurt and now Michael, we've kind of got like our little network of friends. We do use a transit fund, I would say, at least every week or two, if not more. We've used as much as 5 times in one day. But from when me and Kurt first started doing this, everybody knows we've been on bikes a long time. We would see maybe 1 or 2 homeless persons a year, and now it's a daily basis. Most of the time when I come into work, at least once or twice a week, there's someone waiting in the lobby for us. And we try to use the funds the best we can, but there are rules that go along with using the transit fund or the McCollum fund. We tried to bend and shape them every way we can to get the best possible result for the individual without just wasting the money. But sometimes we just don't know what to do. We're learning it. They don't teach you in the police academy or any police school I've ever been to how to deal with homelessness or these type of situations. So everything that we've learned by Kurt gets on the telephone and starts calling people, gets on the computer, just trying to get ideas and different things. It may be I've had to call Kroger to get food up.
We get creative.
Yeah, the situation now is we make it up as we go along, because usually no 2 situations are exactly alike.
Right. So at the Housing Authority, we don't have emergency housing. We're just not equipped. That's not our business. We don't provide that. But we do have housing programs, all of which take a process, an application process that's fairly lengthy, and all of our housing programs have a waiting list. The Shelter Plus Care program, which is the program that Robert mentioned when he spoke earlier, is for individuals who are homeless and have a mental health disability, and that's what I usually work with Dawn and Chad in those cases. But we talk, at least once or twice a week about, an individual who's homeless, or I'll call Martha. We're always on the phone, working towards those emergency situations when they come up. So I guess now we need to talk about what our gaps are. You know, what's needed, what can we do more? Do y'all wanna?
Transportation in Carroll County is a huge issue. Our ladies are limited in a domestic violence shelter because everything is about safety. We can't allow a lot of things because abusers get very creative, and we have to protect our victims. So transportation is a big deal. Martha has some money through some grants that can provide some, and we have a shelter van that we can get to emergency situations, you know, doctors, defects. And there is a TANF program that will get a woman to work. If she goes through that program, they'll supply transportation for that. But there is a big need there, I think, because we're so rural, and you know, a lot of other counties, even some other rural counties, have transportation through that to help better with that. Some of the other gaps that we find is women who kind of fall through the cracks because there are programs through TANF that are available for women who have children. You know, they can get Medicaid, they can get transportation to work, they can go through the Work First program, they can do job coaching, they can do a lot of that. But if you don't have children, although that's changing a little bit with the Medicaid, there's really just not a lot available for them. And we do the best we can as an agency, but our pot of money is limited too. So those are a couple of the things that come strong for us.
Ms. Kathy?
Well, one thing, since we deal with the weekly motel type situations a lot, we're very limited geographically, because there's only 3 or 4 that we can afford. So we and I have tried going to some of the other motels, maybe in Villa Rica or whatever, and they won't budge off their, for us, that's where we're paying for it. They know it's, you know, they're gonna get paid if we pay them, and, but they won't come off their pricing. So we need more affordable, temporary housing somehow for the people, and so that, well, even in Carrollton, like I had one a couple of weeks ago, a homeless couple that they didn't have a car, and he had a job, and there was a motel right across the street from it, so he's gonna really need to walk to his work, or somebody furnish him transportation, but he didn't have any, we didn't have any available, and but we ended up having to pay almost twice as much at the motel for him to stay there to be able to keep his job and work there. So I definitely see the gap in locations of temporary housing.
Okay.
And transportation too.
Transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Missy?
Well, one thing that I do notice with some of my, the families that I've worked with is there are a number of children in the family, and so once, you know, I would call and then ask, and one instance I was able to help the mom get to the shelter, but not all of her children could go because she had too many children and there just were not enough beds, and so you know, it's difficult to talk to a child who doesn't know where they're going to go that afternoon, or a mother who was in a hotel, which I was talking with her at the hotel, and frankly I was a little bit scared to be there, and they had actually decided they were going to start charging her by the child instead of by the room, and she had way too many children, so she was having to move again. And so, you know, when you have meltdowns, and our administration and the teachers are very understanding, but sometimes you have to go and share, well, yeah, they're having a bad day, but if that were me, even at my age, I would be having a really bad day too, because I don't know where I'm going to go. So, and also with families with older boys that might not be able to go into the same housing where mom is because they're too old. So, you know, and we do have unaccompanied homeless youth in our community, and I think in the men's shelter, what I understand is they do have their 2 largest groups. Number 1, substance abusers, and number 2 are 18-year-old males that are dropped off on their birthday. And so, you know, they're young. I mean, I've got a 24-year-old, he's still a baby. So it is just the stress that the children are under. So we try to do as much as we can, and the community's been great because, you know, just calling around and trying to get them where they need to be. But I would say transportation and then affordable housing, what do we do today? You know, if we have an emergency, what can we do? Because $32 is a lot of money.
So, yes, sir.
We live in Whitesburg.
Yes, sir.
Some of you have never been there. Whitesburg is a little tiny town. There are hardly any employee possibilities in Whitesburg. But we have people who would work a job if they could get to it in Carrollton. There's no transportation system to do that. Is there any possibility that somehow we could provide transportation in the morning and in the evening between outlying places like this and Carrollton so that people could work a job and not be homeless? We have had some in our church that are exactly in that situation. Is there any thought about any of this kind of thing?
Well, it's definitely conversations that have been had. I think the issue is, funding,
Who's gonna take responsibility?
and who,
Transportation is the nemesis in Carroll County.
Yep.
Period. There's no
Public
other,
transportation.
we don't have affordable, like Carroll Transit, where you can, like in Heard County or Harrison County, go $5, go uptown, drop off the shop, go shopping, get your doctor's appointment, get back on the transit at 3 o'clock. We don't have public transportation by any, it doesn't matter what population, who, it always comes down to transportation. I would work if I could get there, I'd go to school if I could get there. I have somebody who lives in Whitesburg and I could stay with them, but I don't have any way to get back and forth to stay with them. And I don't know what government agency, private company, who would step up to be responsible for writing a grant or getting, this is what we need. But at the end of the day, no matter who you speak to in government or agency, people in Carroll County, they're all gonna agree transportation.
Strikes me that we ought to be working on something like that. If we did nothing else out of this whole thing, if we could work on that and establish some system, however it costs, that would change a lot of things.
What about if we surveyed the churches and asked if they would use their church buses for this suggestion that he had morning and afternoon, and maybe they could find a member that was dedicated to driving. Maybe it could be different churches every week, every day of the week.
Insurance problem.
Drop off, so it might be a little bit.
and this is, and we'll get to your questions in just a second. This is something that we've discussed with Kim is having, our faith-based, our churches take on this project, not only with transportation, but with the emergency housing issue that we have. I know when someone comes in our office or someone's at the police department with Chad, we have to make 15 different phone calls, which is fine, that's our job. But in the end, we do find them some emergency assistance, but it would be nice to have, well, we know the month of February, this church is going to handle emergency assistance, emergency housing for the community. So we know to call this, contact this church. In the month of March, this church is going to do that. So that's something that we've talked about. Yes, ma'am.
I think churches are an obvious answer in our county. But even the churches will go, well, we have limited funds.
Right.
I represent Our Lady of Perpetual Health and our youth group, and we do a lot of work in Atlanta because, for example, Soup Kitchen, that's during the day off, and so there are a lot more resources and programs that our teens can work with that are evening or weekend kind of things. But they're a great resource to be used if we could utilize them. For example, our youth group, we don't have church buses, but our youth group managed to raise money for their own events. But those buses sit there, not being worked. And our parish is very generous. But I think you're right in the sense of, could it not, our church would never be able to commit to do something all year long.
Right.
But we could sure wrap our brains around February is our month, whether it would be using our social hall as a temporary shelter for 2 weeks. We could wrap our brains around that. We could do it for maybe a month. And the same would be true with the transportation. I mean, if you had a central drop off and pick up location, you know, I think and we're a small church,
Right.
financially, but I think we could do that. I mean,
Okay.
it would have to just be organized of, okay, well then what month or what weeks.
And that's
are
the
another-
purpose of this, for us to have
Right.
this conversation, to get this coming out. Ashley?
I just wanted, we talked about transportation, but the county, about 3.5 years ago, it was proposed to have a county transportation that was turned down by the commissioners. So, it was something similar to what Carrollton County has. It was through a grant at that time. But, there were several of us that had tried to get some sort of, transit type thing for the Carroll County area, but it did not happen. But that has been talked about among the government here.
What were the reasons they gave for turning it down?
Well, it was, there really wasn't enough support for that, and people just were not aware of it at the time. I have, my mother is blind, so I understand how it is for a disabled person to get around town if they didn't have a friend or a family member to get somewhere. If you are trying to go for your chemo treatments, you know, to me, I understood the need for transportation, but a lot did not, so therefore it was voted down.
And one thing they said was, well, let the churches do it. That's one of the things they said.
And she's right, the church buses are sitting still, but people are spread so thin nowadays, it's hard to get volunteers and somebody to be in the trenches with you to help, you know, just do that actual work. So.
Churches have issues with insurance.
Right.
For the buses.
I'm not saying I said that, I'm saying that's what they said.
In the last 30 years, I've served on almost every committee that's been in Carroll County, and I've worked with a lot of these people. They're wonderful people. I think the program you're talking about, the 5311 program, is funded through the Georgia Department of Transportation. Has a lot of hoops to jump through, and it does not give you enough money to operate the program is a problem. And I think when Ashley was talking about the county looking at it, there were a lot of people that were in favor of that. But the fare boxes that are on the buses were not sufficient, is my understanding, to cover the cost of running the program. So our county has looked at it, and it's a great program. I believe Troup County has done it, Carrollton has done it, and some of the other counties, and it's much needed. I mean, Dawn is right, we need the program, but it's gonna have to be a combination like y'all are talking about to make it available for everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
One thing that Troup County has done, I don't know if they're still doing, they had an individual, he was or she was hired for the nonprofit organizations that had different ministries and services to offer. All the nonprofits paid a stipend for this person's salary, and they would evaluate this person and determine what their needs were, and then they would resource that person out. Maybe that's something here in this county that we could do as groups, not just nonprofits, but even county organizations and services, that we could hire someone where we could funnel all this information in, so that people like Jodi and Chad, they aren't running here and yonder and everywhere trying to do something for an individual.
Chad, do you want to talk about any gaps in
Like I mentioned earlier, this, as far as me and Kurt, it wasn't a really that major a problem years ago. I would say probably about 2008, 2009, we personally started seeing an increase of individual people being homeless. Kurt kind of took it upon himself, and you know what I'm talking about, of a young man that he had and Dawn had he was bipolar, diminished mental capacity. He lives in the woods. He lived better in the woods than any TV show you'll ever see. He never asked for anything. Kurt had to basically force him to take a little cash so he'd get something to eat. We had to force him basically to take some groceries from us and stuff like that. We finally was able to, get him some help. The issues we're running across is a lot of them now, they're local people, whether it be drug or alcohol abuse or mental problem, they're popping up, and not just one or two, it's a lot. And we're having issues, they don't have any kind of state ID, so just about to do anything, you have to have some form of ID. Well, to get an ID, you have to have a birth certificate. They don't have it, or they have to have a passport. Well, most people in here probably don't have a passport either. And that's the problems we're running across. And for us as police officers, especially us on bike patrol, most of the time we're the ones that winds up dealing with it. It is almost a kind of a quick fix for the moment, because they call us. Just because we're off work doesn't mean that we don't get the phone calls about it. And that's our job. You know, we don't mind, you know, taking the time with what we're doing on our personal life to try to help these people. We're finding them in bathrooms. Yeah, I guess we could charge them criminally. But what do you tell a person that has nowhere to go, and the only reason they're in the bathroom is because they're cold? You know, and where do we go from there? You know, I can't. Jodi doesn't have any place for me to put them at 5 o'clock in the morning when it's raining, and you know, I've called Dawn and got her out of bed so she could meet one over at Pathway, so she could do a mental evaluation, so they could get fed and get some temporary lodging. But we need a better system that we can put these people at least for a day or two till we can figure something out. If nothing else, to buy us a little time so we can get, you know, our ducks in the road that what we're gonna do.
And I think that's, you know, what we see most is it's always an emergency situation, usually on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. And we're like, well, what are we gonna do?
And on the weekends when most of the programs are closed, that's when we find a lot of them, which I can call Jodi on the weekend, I can call Dawn on the weekend, I don't have a problem with it. The women's shelter is phenomenal, the men's shelter is too, and they do a great job. We can take care of the families pretty good, but it's these 1-2s that we run across. For whatever reason, they're homeless now. A lot of them are just starving to death. And when they get to the police department, we get them to the police department, we'll go upstairs and fix whatever food we got happens to be there, and they will scarf it down. I mean, before I can give it to them, go upstairs to get on the phone or whatever and back, they're already finished. And Tabernacle's been real good about giving us food cards, and it kind of started years ago when me and Kurt were direct traffic. Mamas and dads would come by and they'd hand us a gift card for directing traffic at Christmas time. So we just put them in a box and then we'd give them to the homeless people. Well, it didn't take very long before that didn't last long. And so we like doing the McDonald's and Subway cards because we know that they're not going to be able to go and get beer or you know, buy 10 cents and get the change back and then go buy something illegal. When we have the Walmart or Target cards, we save them for like a family. So if they need to buy diapers or something we don't have in our little food pantry, that they can buy those needs. We one gentleman, we gave him Target cards so he could get shoes because he didn't have any shoes.
Right.
So all this stuff we've kind of we made it up as we went along. It's just the three of us trying to come up with some ideas, working with Jodi, working with Dawn and other people. Everybody's been great. We've never really been turned down with anything. There's just so little resources, and there's very little resources for that emergency situation. Like, they got the temporary shelter opened up on Maple Street. They had 16 people last night. And not all of them were the same people that were there the last time the shelter was open.
The first week, there were about 6, right?
Yeah, it started out, but you know, as we went around, me and Kurt pulled a young guy out of the bathroom, brought him over there, and he was so happy to get out of that bathroom and go get in somewhere that's warm to get fed. I mean, he would have drove the patrol car. And, I mean, we didn't really have to talk them into it, but a lot of these people that we try to get to the women's shelter, they're scared to go to the women's shelter, or they have this misconception that something that it's not, or the men's shelter, they're scared that you're going to get hurt.
Well, the men's shelter is a process to go through. You can't just take them there. There's a process. we don't have anything in place for that immediate help. They show up, they flag us down, other officers call us, we have a homeless individual, we bring them to the police department, there's nowhere else for them to go. The temporary shelter that is opened up on Maple Street, and I suggest people go over there and take a look at what's going on right there.
Are you referring to the old North Point?
Yes.
We've had about 100 people through there.
You know,
some of the stories that just break your heart.
You know, a place like that where it's kind of in place, you know, from all the different, you know, here it comes down to the churches. You can't rely on government, you know. I would say some things. I would say some things.
But wait a minute, these guys are government here.
Right. What I'm saying is, we can't be a fix-all for everything. You know that as citizens. I'm a citizen. I'd rather us help our own citizens than us try to help them as a government. You know, you have all the different churches. We have a facility right now on Maple Street. If it could just be stocked with more cots, more food, more volunteers. You know, I'm not saying it needs to be open 24/7, but it definitely needs to be open when we have snowstorms, when we have, you know, weather events, any type of major disaster. You know, people that have homes, they have insurance. You have the Red Cross, you have Salvation Army, all that's going to come and play for those type people. We don't have for the people that we find living in the woods, that have been living in the woods for 4 years, or people that are still in the woods today, to get them out of the woods and get them, you know, it takes a lot of effort.
Most of the people we deal with they're not asking us for things. A lot of times when they finally make it to the police department, it's because they're so hungry, they're so cold, and when they ask for help, they call the police.
Right.
Or the police find them.
Right.
The patrolmen that are working at night a lot of times come into contact with people. We would call prowling around. I mean, they have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Those officers at night have a harder time than we do during the day, and often refer them to us to try to follow up on. But honestly, sometimes they then hide from us. Some of them, they're living in abandoned houses, they're living on other people's property, they're living in public property, and they really, this is one of the reasons the government isn't the answer, at least in full, because a lot of them distrust it. I mean, honestly, sometimes people go to jail for having an open container in a park because that's the best thing for them and Carrollton that night, but it's not the answer to their problem. So we find dead ends in the government agencies, and even in some of the quasi-government or private agencies where they have strict rules about where we can put people. It's difficult to find room for a small family, really difficult for a large family, difficult to find room for a male who is a drug user or has mental issues that are very obvious and somewhat scary to people. They approach women in parking lots at night and ask for money, and those things do not make people want to help a lot of times. It scares them and they worry, they call us, and it's very negative sometimes when the police roll up on you. That's their perception. They're not exactly happy with their situation, and they wonder, okay, am I going to jail or is he going to help? We rolled up on a couple about a month and a half ago in the Walmart, or no, the Kroger parking lot area, coming from Maine, heading into Alabama, if I remember right. Louisiana. Yeah. And they told, I think I was off from both of them at the time, told me we have never had police officers treat us like this. They usually push us off somewhere or threaten arrest. You know, but with a lot of the things that the bike patrol does and the Carroll Police Department does, the food, the gift cards, things like that, they are not government programs.
Right.
They are things that these guys thought up
right.
Over the years. Not me. I've only been there on bikes since August, My resource was the jail.
I think
until I
it's
came to
absolutely great what you're doing.
Absolutely.
I
Well-
do, and I think your heart is as big as it has to be able to serve people.
You just
But I
don't know
will
me that
tell
well.
you, but I will tell you, there is a lot of liability in what is going on. There's a lot of liability. We talk about the shelter at 7. I think it's wonderful. Wouldn't it be a shame if Carroll County couldn't do something on these cold nights for people? But do you know that the minute you open a shelter, the minute you apply for a 501(c), all that, the liability starts then. You've got a person who's mental. You cannot place that person if there's certain problems with other people. You've got people that you've got to think about drug and alcohol abuse. If you are serving children, you can't place people like that together. I mean, there's 1,000 things that no matter what we say, there are guidelines that towards how we serve people. And y'all mentioned about them not wanting to come to shelter. Well, I don't think anybody ever thought in their life they wanted to go to a shelter to live. But what I'm saying is I can understand that sometimes what you're living in, at least you know what that is. And that's easier than not knowing what it's like in a shelter. But I think that you're absolutely right. We have to step up as a community and do what is right. But we also got to follow guidelines, and we'll have all kind of lawsuits and everything else in the world when we're working with people. Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
I want to follow up with what Chad said about the IDs in our healthcare nowadays, that when you have to go to a doctor, you have to present an ID, and like you were saying, it's hard when you don't have, I mean, you sign over your birthright to get your license renewed. So it's hard for these people, so they go to the ER, and the ER just discharges them and gives them a follow-up of meeting with the doctor immediately or within the week or whatever. Well, we ran into the situation with the gentleman. I mean, it was just hard for us to find somebody that would take him because there was no ID. And there is a couple of clinics in Temple and in Bremen that will take him, but they're only open on a Tuesday or on a Thursday or that sort of thing. So, you know, well, what did I do? I asked that you contact your state representatives because there is an issue here that is a gap that is missing. So Dusty Hightower is aware of this, and I think several people have already called him to, you know, let it be known that, you know, this is an issue that, you know, so I wanted just to follow up just to kind of see how the ID thing works there.
Yes, ma'am, you had a question?
Yes, I did want to follow with what Martha was saying, is I think, like the place on Maple Street, I think it's a fabulous idea. And how can we perpetuate those ideas without being legally strapped with everything? In working with shelters, you can't serve food out of that kitchen for very long without having this certain kind of dishwasher, this certain kind of temperature in your refrigerator. I mean, the legal ramifications of trying to help people who truly need help at the ground level are just struggling. And how do we get around that, you know, to be able to truly help people, to run a shelter?
Well, let me say, we know we're breaking all the rules over there.
Well,
We know
good.
it.
I mean,
And we know we're
that's what
taking on a lot of
we need.
liability, but there's a need that's gotta be met. And how do we do it in the long run, we don't know.
Well, that was my
We've got to
question.
figure it out.
There are a lot of things that we can do, but if we can legally be able to do them without going through all those.
But we've had to take,
Then we can't
we've
do
had to
it.
call
We can only do
ambulances
what
4
y'all do.
times. Yeah, and get medical treatment for folks, because they were so seriously ill, we had to do something. I spent the night over there last night, and I came real close to calling these guys, and I thought there was gonna be a fist fight. We got to deal with that, with anger management. And we've never had to do that before in anything, none of us have done, so it's new to us. But the ID thing is real critical. We've had a lot of people over here, we could get them help, we just had an ID, and they didn't know my ID.
If you've ever been arrested, we accept IDs from the jail. They can print off their booking, is that what it's called, their booking?
We've done
arrest?
that.
Yeah, so we've tracked people wherever they've been arrested and try to get copies of that. But I would think, since you're not a permanent shelter and an emergency shelter, emergency things get all kinds of waivers. So I would just think that there might be some ordinance, legislative, political, whatever word.
So far, the health department folks haven't knocked on the door, wanting to
Right, and that you can somehow, because it's emergency, it's not a firm structure like the men and women's shelter, because you may go into the
Well,
emergency.
we're lucky though that was a restaurant immediately.
Yeah.
And so it probably would come close to passing.
Right.
The only thing we don't have, we know
It had
we
to
need
be
is a
the
commercial
code.
dishwasher.
And I would contribute to your legal fine if something ever happens.
Thanks, Dawn. Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say, whatever we come up with, one thing that would be nice is a lot of people have access to schools, whether you have a child in a school or a nephew or niece. So any of the information that we come up with, like some of these, I'm very familiar with a lot of it, I call. It would be nice to put the information out where parents can get it, not necessarily where you go through the counselors and get it. Because what we find out is, it goes along with what they say, is if you have children, you're very, very wary of getting the government involved because you assume defects they're gonna take your children. So a lot of the times, they won't ask you, but if we had information that we could put out discreetly, where we could either send it home or they could take it, I think we would have people that would at least know the resources and how to help themselves, or some of them will come through us for help.
Without putting, yes.
This, now, I wasn't aware of this, and this, Georgia Research Network, and so that puts out information of what we have to offer. Is it not something that we could do another part of, like, this is what we need? We're the services, but right now, we need bras. Right now, I mean, all I can think of when you said that
That's
there's
available on that website.
that is on there, okay, so like even the gift cards, that would be so easy for like our youth group, when we have our Christmas party, everyone bring a $5 gift card. I mean, if we have 100 kids, I mean, you'd have $500, and we just didn't know that was a need.
There's a link through there that, lists, like, all of the organizations and what their needs are by organization. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my name is Karen. I'm new in the area. I've been here 8 months. I transferred with my job from Punta Gorda, Florida. I'm with the Walmart.com. I understand we are needing volunteers. Walmart will give their associates $250 for every 24 hours, every quarter to volunteer. If you have 50 associates for 250 hours, you can qualify for the $5,000 grant. So if I can get some more information from someone as far as where you need volunteers at, I can take back to our building and share it with the associates. Walmart has a lot of money that they can give and they want to give to help.
Awesome.
So just if I can get that information for someone, I'd appreciate it.
And I just say, most of you do know, St. Vincent de Paul is a Catholic lay organization. But you do not have to be Catholic to volunteer and help us, and you certainly don't have to be Catholic to benefit from our resources, because most of the people we help are not Catholic, you know. So we need volunteers desperately.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the problems that I see, I'm a school social worker, one of the problems I have is having things throughout the county. Usually, most of my families in the different other cities have to come to Carrollton in order to get the services. And with transportation being part of the issue, that's a major, major problem. And even with some of the agencies that they've called, that I refer them to, if they're not in Carrollton, they don't get the funds. They have to be within Carrollton. And so that means my Villa Rica folks or my Mount Zion folks or my Temple folks are left out. And I've ran into that situation in which if I could have switched the two individuals, they would have gotten funds. Their situations were different. One worked but wasn't in Carrollton. One had a house, no job, but would qualify, but they didn't qualify for what they needed. And the goal was trying to prevent the one who had the residence to not lose it, because it's difficult once they lose the housing to get it back because of all of the deposits. And there are not too many agencies that assist them with getting their deposits and different things that they need. And there are not that many emergency shelters around. And with one of the problems is with some of my families, they can't go to the emergency shelter because of some of the restrictions, like one who had to work, and there's the husband and she has all these kids, he has to watch the kids, and there were just so many different restrictions that they could not even get into the shelter with that. And so they were staying at the hotel, and we were trying to assist as best we can with getting them.
Well, and I think that, you know, the short stay hotels, motels are a godsend really, because, you know, they're there, and they're available most times. I think that what we need to do, one of our goals is maybe to streamline those services. So what do you guys think about, the faith-based organizations, the churches taking on